Hello, everybody. Welcome to Everything in Moderation, the International Edition. We have a lovely new face for us today, and she will be joining us. So, Maria, please introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Maria Montesinos. I am a senior political science major at Ramapo College. I am the Senate President for the Student Government Association. So, hi, everybody.
Yo,
Excellent. We're looking forward to hearing what you bring to the table. We're very excited.
yeah, poli sci major. We needed one of those.
Yeah. um, all right. What are we talking about today, guys?
Talk about big tech, or specifically, we're talking about what happened in Australia regarding, I think it was Facebook and Australia's new regulations they put. So the specific regulation that we're talking about is Australia wants Facebook to pay the publishers that they make money off of for advertisements. So let's say like independent news organizations on Facebook and they're sending news and they use ads with that uh, little line there. They have to pay them according to Australia, and Facebook just said nope, no Facebook for you anymore, and cut it off for them for a little while. It's back up now. Oh, at least they are moving towards doing what Australia has said. But the big thing here is, is Australia a template for what other countries should do in regards of regulating big tech? Because in other places it's kind of forgone. So
That was the question I had before this. I was going to be like,
Yeah.
what do we
I
all
think
think about that?
well, I think one of the main factors you have to look at when you talk about big tech is, what kind of company, what organization. Uh, and I think in terms of Facebook, Twitter, things of that nature, the controversy really has to do with speech. It's not really like another company that doesn't act like its own publisher. So Facebook, this story is good, even though I believe Facebook has just made a deal with Australia, and they're kind of coming to some sort of agreement. But when we talk about big tech, uh, it's really what is being censored in terms of people's speech, and then how much the government has any control over that. Anyone have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I have to agree with Patrick on that. I think this kind of delves into what is considered, an overstep on free speech. I definitely think some other countries are looking at an example of this. They can find loopholes to say, okay, you know, Australia is doing this, and that's something that we can look at doing as well. Um, but it's really just like that conversation of like what is the government going to do, in regards to big tech?
that's a great question. And one of the most important ones for big tech is the company that they're stationed in America. So why have these companies grown so huge to the point that we're even having this conversation that they have is control of our free speech? Well, I'll tell you, the US has really bad antitrust laws. Not really bad antitrust laws, really bad enforcement of antitrust laws. So we all know the hubbubaloo that Facebook and all the tech companies, Amazon, Google, are going through with the United States and having to be put on trial for stuff they did in the past. So now that is just happening. They're just kind of coming back to bat with that. But beforehand, the damage is done. When Facebook and Amazon and any kind of social media company, well, Amazon's not really a social media company, so kick them out of that circle. When they came to power, they pretty much axed or imploded, you could say, a lot of private or just independent publishers. Like anybody who's in independent media. So nowadays you really only have a select group of media sources you can get because Facebook is really dominating in the independent media sources now. So I would definitely say that, you know, because of that, Australia and other countries like Germany, for example, really want to put them in check because they see what happened in America and they don't want that to happen to them with these tech companies.
Is there any hope for us in trying to shake their power up a little bit.
Well, what you have to look
Maybe.
at, I think one of the big things to look at if we were talking United States, which would be, I guess, the next area or, the biggest issue right now for at least us is it's 47 US Code Section 230. And it's, protection for private blocking and screening of offensive material. So I believe that's how, the government, I know it was Trump back during his presidency was questioning that, and a lot of other people in Congress were questioning that. So what you look at there is whether there's even, if it's even possible to remove that, or what implications that would have on smaller companies if you do that. Because, when I look at Twitter, Facebook, Google, I look at them as monopolies. Do you guys think that's, because it's covering the whole entire world, also Alibaba, it goes beyond, and it's dangerous. So if you were to start doing this, would it set a precedent or be applied to smaller companies? Would that create another issue in a smaller area?
Ah, just to add on to that too, I think another issue regarding these, like, when we're talking about Twitter, Facebook, these websites that started out as like social networking websites has turned into this atmosphere where you have people publishing stuff and they sell this information. So, your Facebook, like this happens to me all the time when I'm on my Facebook, I'll see like stuff regarding like different brands of clothes that I probably wear. So like they sell this information that was personal um, and supposed to be private, and now it's out in the public for other companies as well. So I think that's another like could be an overreach of like your private and personal information.
But I also feel
Definitely.
like people know about this, regardless of looking into a contract or anything that they sign. If you download any app, that usually has a privacy and terms section, and it's just so long that the average person is not going to look into it. So I'm sure that it notes that, you know what I mean? They're clever like that. So yeah, it's like if you mention, I don't know, something about bread, you're going to get an advertisement about bread, or a certain video game, it might come up on your feed. So it's, and I know the biggest case I think is in China, and they have a lot of control there, the government does. Whether or not a company can even do better, or in terms of capitalism, or just expand into other countries, they have a limitation on that if it doesn't help the government.
Yeah,
uh,
I
yeah.
think it was Facebook itself who said that basically they're providing value to news publishers by sending like traffic to media websites, and in this way can be like monetized with advertising. Um, yeah, that's a big thing right now.
Yeah.
So,
I mean,
sorry, you go ahead.
okay. I was just going to talk about the privacy issue there. And there's a huge privacy issue, specifically in the United States, when it comes to data. And it's primarily because you don't own your data. So anything that you have and put on the internet, it's available for these companies to sell on the marketplace of data. And if you ever heard of the phrase, data is more expensive than gasoline, well, I'll tell you, Amazon as a company proves it, because Amazon is the biggest seller of data, even past Facebook. I know that seems a little weird because they're just a store, but every single time you click, that click's going in a database, and they know that little piece of information about you. So they'll definitely sell that to sites like, they even sell it to Facebook, to be completely honest, because they can sell that through ads as well. But Facebook also has its own marketplace of data. But it's mostly because the United States does not have very good privacy laws in regards to data.
So what I was going to ask is, do you think that regulating the selling of data would be like a good start here, or do you think it would be more of a different area you'd have to tackle?
That's a very hard question. So, that drags back to the inventor of the internet. One time he said, specifically on this issue, is if you start regulating the internet, it can backfire, and the internet can essentially just kind of blow up in your face. Let me give you an example. So if Australia's line of thinking were to go and become more advanced, and every single person that publishes anything and then has an ad attached to it gets paid, that kind of breaks the structure of the internet. where people have to pay constantly to do things. Not only that, if that is the precedent, then companies will start doing the same. And if you have to pay your way to even play on the internet, no one's going to go on it. I'm not trying to pay to go look at a freaking wiki article. So there's a good and a bad thing to regulation. I think smart regulation can be achieved. I think Australia, the way it's going, is better than Germany's approach. Germany's approach is a lot like Australia's, but what they had to contend with was the European Union at the time, which shot them down, which also shows you how similar the European system is to the American system when it comes to corruption via lobbying. So that's also another important role to play in any kinds of politics. That's why you see Australia succeeding in doing something like that, and Germany not.
Danny, I remember you mentioned beforehand that you wanted to kind of go into how big tech has affected globalization.
Yes.
I'm very excited to hear your little spiel about this.
Yep. So let me give you an example. So, what's happening in India right now? India is becoming an economic powerhouse. And why is that? They just came out of their so-called so industrial revolution, they would say. It's not an actual industrial revolution, but it's a revolution in that a lot of people are now getting everything outsourced out of India. And I can tell you firsthand, I work with people from India that do a lot of our SQL stuff. Um, the reason that is because it's just much cheaper. So because of all this money and all this attention becoming or going into India right now, big tech is kind of just throwing their money at India. And the reason why that is if they can set up first in India, they can control what's happening in India. They can control how the internet is in India, specifically Amazon and their investment in Geo. I think it was a $7 billion investment. They are setting up internet like ways to buy like routers, ways to set up networks. They're basically setting up the infrastructure for the people of India to start using devices. But the reason why that's a force of globalization is now they're going to get the same media that we do. So India is very different, and they are becoming more, I would say, globalized as the day go by. However, now it's going to get even worse because there's not everything you can get here. It's like if you ever go to Germany, you can't find a bag of chips on a grocery store, and you're like, what, right? And the reason why is because food cultures there is different. But a lot of things get changed as you start bringing in these countries or companies, and it definitely is a force of globalization, specifically in India.
Looking at just India right now, I just Googled real quick. Like, I'm pretty sure that I saw this before. I just wanted to confirm it. That India actually has the most Facebook users on the platform, which is pretty
Yeah.
crazy.
Well, India, I think after the fact of China, has the most internet users in general.
Wow.
Well,
So
it
that
has an
is
extremely
the
large
reason why.
population.
Yeah, exactly. That is why there's so much
1.36
tension
billion
there.
in it.
Yeah, I think that would explain the recent friend request I got from India. I got a couple actually. But
Oh yeah.
just going off of that, like you were saying, Daniel, like going off of this like hyper globalized world that we're living in now, you know, it's like who would moderate the internet? I don't know if we'll ever reach a point. Um, but you basically see with like the riot that recently just happened, people are able to become mobilized, and this is all going on internet. These are platforms that people are using, and it could be detrimental. So I think we'd have to look at if it were to be possible, who would be regulating this? Would it be? I don't think it would be a government. I think it'd have to be some sort of international organization, and I don't exactly agree with that. Yeah.
I don't think an international organization would be able to do anything. It has to do with the state itself. International organization can push pressure. They can maybe it's really about having or influencing another state to possibly put some sort of sanctions or to add a law or remove a certain law. And that's the biggest issue when you talk about a monopoly and these companies that are so large. You're not talking about one country. You're talking about its effects on every single state. And although each of those states are very different in their governance and leadership, you have the liberal democracy and the republic section in the United States, but then you have kind of the dissected kind of authoritarian government in China. They still all have their issues, and it goes into a lot of things. I mean, you can talk about economics, talk about the law and how people govern. It affects it all. And don't get me wrong, certain parts of globalization has its pros. It's great to be able to understand other cultures and be able to work with them. It helps all sorts of things. Uh, but I think the downsides are almost higher, and how a state can stop and regulate that is really up to how that state governs. It's going to be a different conversation depending on where you're talking about. Uh,
Now,
so
Patrick, I'm going to challenge you on your claim because I've just brought up India as an example of one of those forces of globalization. So, what would happen if, let's say, Amazon, because they're most involved with their infrastructure, what would happen if India was like, hey, you know what? I don't like that you have a monopoly in retail. So, we are going to try to solve this issue for our economy. And Amazon just says, okay, I think we're just going to leave India altogether, take our infrastructure with us.
that's,
You know what
yeah,
I mean?
yeah.
So it becomes a problem that they have. It's like if you were to take away a natural resource in the United States, because that's basically what the internet is. It is a resource that people use all the time. And, you really can't get work done if you don't have that infrastructure. And I'm telling you right now, once it's set up, the work, how Indians work is going to be a lot different.
Well,
Because
yeah, and India. It's good that you bring this up though, because India for years has been told to be, this untapped economy. This huge population, this huge potential. But when you talk about, big tech, specifically Amazon, I think Christian could speak more to this. It really has to do with the people and the economy. Because it's one thing, and you bring it up already, to say let's just cancel Amazon. They're too big, they're too powerful. We don't want this. It's dangerous. We don't have, but at the other end, you don't have many options. How do you look at these other options? It's like when you have a conversation about environmentalism, people say that natural resources, natural gas, they say that that could be harmful. The smoke, fume, but then the other option isn't fully cemented yet. It's similar, and that you want this alternative, but it's not really there yet. I think the best conversation to have is where are these alternatives? How can we create them? Because once we get more competition, then we could really work on taking down Amazon, Google, Twitter. I hope they don't listen to me here because I don't want to be taken. Not YouTube. YouTube is fine.
Yeah,
YouTube listens
honestly, I feel
to.
like YouTube's the least problematic out of all of them.
Yeah.
YouTube has a lot of, let's just say, copyright issues. So
Yeah.
you'll notice, like, if you're a creator on YouTube, and this is getting off point a little bit, but I still like to talk about it. If you're a creator on YouTube, you could get copyright struck by anybody, and they'll they'll take the video down and start giving income from the video to the other party, and then YouTube reviews it. So that, personally, I think is a huge problem with how YouTube's run, because it allows corporations like Warner Brothers to just bully YouTube channels and steal their money, and then they really can't do anything about it. So
Yeah, but
I've
that also goes along the lines of how hard it is to even regulate the internet, because again, each country has its own types of things, and what actually applies. I mean, it even goes as small as to say state laws, like in America. State laws there. It's even hard to regulate there. So I mean, it's connected in a way. Uh, any
yeah,
thoughts on?
no, you're definitely right.
Yeah, yeah.
It's very big mess. It's a very big mess when it comes to regulation, specifically on the internet, because it's a new territory for people. So when it comes to that type of stuff, I mean, think about our new territory when it came into democracy. What happened when we first did democracy? Plato wasn't that successful, nor was Rome, but now here we are. We're pretty good.
I mean,
But
even our
it take
first
time.
type of constitution didn't really work either. We had to
Yeah,
work.
exactly. These things take time. So
Yep.
I hope the infrastructure to the internet, and I definitely see if the internet itself was more globalized, it being a net good, just because if everybody can get information, it kind of doesn't solve, but it does a lot of good for the problem of media illiteracy, one of the topics of last episode, or one of the last episodes.
Yeah, I was thinking of that as well. And you can also look at the trend of what countries are in the conversation, what key players they are on the international base. You have India, China, Brazil's included, the US. So these are all big companies. And media literacy, you talked a lot about Finland. These all have some sort of connections, and definitely a more developed economy, more developed nation. So you're not really going to be talking about other countries that are still struggling.
Look at you guys plugging our past episodes. I love it. I
Always
don't
gotta
even
do
instruct
it.
them to do this.
Media literacy, media literacy.
Yeah.
I'm a big guy on
So
that.
I have another question for everybody. Do you think that because like we're still in the internet's like infancy period, I guess you could say, do you think that one day we might get like a more decentralized internet with more like choices of like where to take your web surfing?
What do you mean by decentralized? I would just need to know the definition of that.
Like
Like more of a marketplace, instead of me going to YouTube, be like, this is the only player in town for me to watch
yeah,
videos. Is
like
that what you
like
mean?
that, and like you know how like there's like the deep web, all that stuff, like that's sort of like decentralized in a way.
All, all you,
And yeah,
I
like
can tell you
seeing
that all you need is a VPN, and you can go web searching. No, I'm
Yeah,
joking.
but that VPN costs money too. I mean, I think it has to do again, what people are comfortable with as well. I mean, you look at what we call dangerous, uh, companies. I talk about Amazon, all these other things, and then the privacy. Just going back real quick to the privacy. A lot of people just kind of overlook it because there's not other options. But I think there's been attempts to find other forms of communication. I mean, if you look at the conservative group, they try to use Parler more rather than Twitter. I mean, there's attempts.
I think the big problem when it comes to what you're saying, a decentralized, or let's say it less of an oligopoly
Mhm.
internet. I don't know if that
Like that
sentence
word.
even makes sense, but if you would like to have something like that, I feel like technically that's impossible, mostly because of how states run, or like for example China, like they're not going to see Facebook on China, are you? Or Instagram. But they heavily regulate their internet, and they're not the only country to do so. And also there's countries that are trying to do privacy laws, so a lot of content is unavailable there as well. So there's too many ideas in the melting pot here, and what ends up happening is it's a complete anarchy. So when that happens, natural monopolies will form, and you can see that in like economics will tell you that if you don't regulate the market at all, there's definitely going to be a monopoly.
Mhm.
It's the same thing on the internet. There's definitely going to be a monopoly. Like for example, YouTube's a perfect example of a monopoly of the internet, where they can share strict just videos with others and just be content creators. And you could see how that has been a very bad thing for content creators just over the years. So monopolies in general aren't good, and you can see that on internet.
I
If
wonder
we
if
want to
there's
talk
any.
about regulations and what's bad for content creators, I think China's the best example. I mean, look at Alibaba, it's a huge company, right? But I think it has more of a guise of being in control because it's so large. But no, the CCP still has a lot of say over it. I believe it was Daniel Zhang, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, the head of Alibaba. It's either him or someone else in this technocracy, you could call it, who started to talk a lot and wanted to expand even more. But when the ideology started to kind of cross with the CCP, that person shut up. You stopped hearing from them for a little bit, But that's like a very specific, rare example of where the government has control over what seems to be a very large company. So this is different than the conversation we're having earlier of globalization, because China itself, I think, although they're expanding, they're just as easy to just kind of isolate. That's why they're so interesting. It's such an interesting country. Uh, yeah.
I mean, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Maria.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I think that to answer the question, I have a different opinion. I think that since we're just at like the very inception of, internet usage, I think that there will be new emerging, whether platforms, social networking platforms, or internet platforms where you'll be able to connect. What we saw was Instagram, for example, when it just came out. I think it was like early, like close to 2012 or 2010 when it was taking off. And I believed that it was going to be something that would die off. But it actually is integrating now, like I think it's called Reels. I don't know if you guys have seen that.
Yep.
Some videos too, and it's really just competing, and it's been gaining attraction. So I think that there'll be new emerging social networking sites that we'll be using maybe 10, 20 years from now that we don't know yet. So it's really just like a competition of, who can produce the best so far. And after then, I still believe that monopolies are still going to monopolize without control.
Well, TikTok's a good example. I mean, you could say that, I mean, it was Musically before, right? But then it became TikTok, and that's fairly new, but now it's becoming its own thing. And what's strange is that they're all so similar. I mean, they all have, if you just look at the certain gadgets within it, if you look at Snapchat, TikTok, and Instagram, they all have, what is it, like stories? You can post stuff, videos, pictures. It's all kind of a similar version. And then you have the argument again, or the issue of privacy. And then you have what to regulate, and then you have issues within, these minute
Hey,
things.
real quick, just one thing to challenge you guys on that is I would ask who owns those companies, because when it comes to Instagram, now Facebook owns that, I believe is Facebook.
Yep.
Facebook now owns Instagram.
Yeah,
And,
Facebook owns Instagram.
when it comes to TikTok, now Microsoft owns it. I think they just made that deal in September. But what ends up happening with a lot of the competition that does arise, that was a very good point, is that this competition gets bought out just because the pure amount of wealth that the tech companies have, because there's not many things that are more lucrative than data, I'll tell you that. And you can see just by the amount of investments they make, these countries, they really just investing all the money that they get. If you look at their models of how they grow, it's through investments, and it's through R&D, and that's how tech companies work. So they kind of got to do this. It's just it's like a survival thing for them. So they have to go see an idea, take it, and in this case, they took TikTok, and they bought TikTok rather. And that was an investment for them, because now they have this platform that everybody uses the whole time when it could have been its own thing.
Mm-hmm.
So just to clarify, ByteDance still owns TikTok, but there was talks about Microsoft trying to acquire them. But this leads me into my next question, and Danny kind of alluded to. I kind of know what Danny's answer might be, but so is it wrong to think of big tech as sort of a bad guy, or do you think it's like a warranted label? Who wants to take a crack at
Well,
it?
I think it depends on what on what topic you're talking about, because it's like what I said earlier, globalization, all these, big companies that we're comfortable with have their positives. You get to learn a lot, but again, there's also a lot of false things out there. And then, I guess in the terms of monopolies, in terms of privacy, in terms of there being barely anything to go to but these things, you can say that's an issue. It's an opinion whether you're comfortable with just a few things or a lot of things. But no, yeah, it is. I think you could say they're the bad guys. I don't see why not. But also, last thing though, I think people, us, when you talk about big companies, we like to say that they're the bad guys. But a lot of us aren't boycotting. I think it speaks to the market economy, if you want to say. They respond to us, and they wouldn't have all this money, investment, and gained followers if people weren't going towards it. If we really want to stop the problem and say they're the bad guys, then I think our actions have to speak louder than our words.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I don't shop at Walmart. I don't shop at Target or anything. I just try to get my stuff locally if I can. With my dad being a small business owner, obviously it hits home a little
Yeah.
bit.
I'll add in my 2 cents before letting Danny go, but I was going to say it's basically just a product of their environment. I mean, can you really blame an entrepreneur for wanting to, make money, be a business person? So I think this is like what happens when we look at, under regulation, in my personal opinion. And that, like I said, again, it depends on how you view it. But again, I really think it comes down to them being a product of the environment, and it's also like unregulated capitalism, like what happens when you see that. So yeah, that's all I have to add.
Danny.
So my big thought is they are one of the biggest bad guys out there. And I'll tell you why. They have all your information. They have almost every single thing that you do, where you go. They know everything about you. And I'm telling this from like the point of view of someone that has seen everything that's going on Facebook. I track them. I'm a big tech guy, and that's how they make money. They sell your data to whoever, and we're not very concerned about it right now because it's not going to affect the average Joe. But later on down the line, you don't know how our country or any other country is going to go, specifically internationally. So if these people are selling your data, guess who they're selling it to? They're going to be selling it to their country. And, that leads to a lot of problems. Specifically, let's give an example. What's that country? Belarus. Belarus is a dictatorship in Europe. If the Belarus government got the profiles, Facebook profiles, and learned what political ideologies certain people found, oh, send some SS over there, clear that problem right out. So that is a harsh example of what can happen when companies sell everything they know about you. Not even to mention how bad it could be for intelligence operations or any kind of intelligence operations, because you might not think a spy would be bad enough to put his information or any kind of thing that could compromise him out on the internet. But you'd be surprised how many devices that man uses. Anything that he goes on and connects to the internet and involves, a company that uses it. WhatsApp is a good example. If he has to use WhatsApp or something, all that information is gone out there and sold by the dollar. So I would definitely take that into large consideration, before we say I'm not boycotting these, because I use them all the time. I can't boycott these companies just because it's kind of my industry, but I definitely feel a little bad because I can't do that, specifically with Amazon, because I definitely think that they are a big abuser when it comes to having too much power.
Well, I agree, and especially when you bring politics into the mix. But the hardline question is, how do we change it? How do we stop it? Because it's just so accessible, it's so available, and I think just your average Joe kind of knows about this. They know that, and you can tell it's evidential when you look at your advertisements. You're like, how does that advertise? How is it there? I was just talking about that. It's simple things like that, and I think people overlook it because they're like, oh, I mean, they could have my information, sure, whatever. What are they gonna do with it? I'm fine. I'm not weird. I'm not committing any crimes. So I think people are very easy to overlook it. And I fall under that category sometimes because I just feel like I'm, doing normal everyday things.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that because like we learn about like what they do in marketing and like target marketing, they use the data, all that stuff.
Yeah.
So like to me, I'm like, oh look, it's helpful. It's helpful when I need
Yeah.
it, like it pops up. Well, actually, whenever I need it, it never shows up. Sometimes I'll be like streaming on my phone, I'll be like, give me an ad about this, and then I think it hears me. It doesn't want.
Come on, algorithm, go work.
It doesn't work like that.
It doesn't work like that, unfortunately. But yeah, like it to me, it's not really that outlandish. But like, take Eric on the other podcast. He's like, no, this thing shouldn't be. This shouldn't be allowed. This is really freaky. And I'm just like, yeah, it's whatever. I learned about it in class.
We also don't realize how many companies are just owned by the larger one. I mean, you could look at that in anything from big tech to car companies to other areas. You just look at it a little more. You do a little research into these details. You're like, five of these big ones are a part of this big one. When did
Yep.
this happen? How is this allowed? Like, I thought we had laws against this, at least in our country. You know?
Well, we do, and then it's not enforced.
Yes, and the question is why? Who is it benefiting?
Primarily, it's because of the U.S. bank system and the path between what has happened. But that's another episode.
Don't get me started on the banks, bro. Oh my days. All right. We will wrap it up on that. Thank you everyone for coming. Maria, thank you for joining us. Looking forward to having you again. So that is all from us. Have a lovely weekend because everyone will be listening to this on Friday. So have a lovely weekend and catch you next Friday. See ya.
See you later, guys.